The beloved Simpsons family spent a lot of time in front of TV. But how much is it actually? Lucky you, I seem to have a lot of spare time on my hands. I did the math and counted the TV watching habits of The Simpsons and noticed how it reflects the changes in writing, style, quality and focus. Letting animated characters watch TV seems so natural, so we tend to overlook how the writers of The Simpsons impressively weaved in jokes and story with these scenes.
It's 11 o'clock. Do you know where your children are?
I told you last night, no!
Let me share some wisdom with you. Many animated shows turn the screen within the screen into a storytelling device, rich with humor and meaning. TV serves as a microcosm of the characters' personalities, their society, and even the storytelling style of the show itself. By showing how characters consume or interact with television, these series reflect not only on the role of media in the fictional worlds, but also comment on its influence in our own lives, who we are, and what we choose to consume. Seeing animated characters in front of the telly is our window to look into the world they inhabit. It's interesting what they bother to watch, and also what the writers want to tell us. A good tool to move the plot forward, for satire, world building, or simply gags. Observing animated characters watching TV is kind of fascinating and makes them a lot more relatable. I mean, the place where Homer Simpson belongs the most at home is arguably his beloved couch and equally treasured television. Chances are high you could be in the exact same position as Homer. If not, you probably never had a lazy day. On top of that, we vividly remember these shows within shows, or even the commercials to some extent, just as much as the series themselves, presenting us their versions to parody their real-life counterparts. These fictional programs often become so iconic, they take on a life of their own, embedding themselves in our memory. The Rick and Morty episode where the pair sits on the couch and watches interdimensional cable was well received, but in essence, The Simpsons did it first.
Simpsons did it! Simpsons did it!
The Simpsons combine all the approaches utilizing their TV watching to satirize, to advance the plot, for jokes that paid off with the character or not, in this instance of no interaction, being a mild forerunner of Family Guy's cutaway gags. But The Simpsons had the framing of having it watched by a character, and this, albeit also showing self-contained jokes, had a purpose, because it oftentimes paid off with them, through their reaction as a setup for a joke with the characters, or establishing a plot point for the episode. Rick and Morty focused on one approach and stretched it out to a whole episode. But The Simpsons are uncontested peak on this matter, in mastering the advantages of animated characters watching TV for story and joke telling. And The Simpsons did it way back in their early years on a regular basis. The Simpsons was shaped by the 90s and helped to define them. That's where the golden age lies. In my mind, it's always going to be remembered like that, a 90s show. One cultural aspect of the 90s is the family coming together and watching TV. Despite the frequent dysfunction within the Simpsons household, their TV time represents a moment of unity. The act of sitting down together is a rare constant, offering a small but meaningful sense of stability. This ritual speaks to the heart of why television has been so significant in family life. For decades, families have gathered in front of their TVs, not just for entertainment, but as a shared cultural touchstone. In the Simpsons family, this tradition is fundamentally relatable, grounding even their most outrageous antics in a familiar domestic routine, even from time to time shown eating while gazing at the screen. One of the most enduring images in television history is the opening of The Simpsons, where the family rushes into the living room to settle in front of the TV. This recurring scene highlights something deeply universal and is unexpectedly kinda wholesome. The shared experience of gathering around the television as a family. I was baffled when I found out they majorly skipped the couch gig entirely nowadays, robbing the show of its iconic intro. But if we think about it, it makes sense, as this is not the 90s show anymore we fell in love with. Through their identity struggles and tedious attempts to stay relevant and adjusting their timeline, we see how our society changed over the course of the over 30 years run of the show. But more on that later. Every few years I watch The Simpsons from seasons 1 to 8 or 10. Depending on my mood. And on my last rewatch I noticed how much episodes dedicate a lot of screen time on the program the characters are watching. Even starting episodes with a show or commercial from the Simpsons universe. I was focusing more on these instances and was charmed whenever they put it on. Then for comparison's sake I watched a handful of episodes from modern Simpsons wildly out of order. Not only were these episodes not as captivating or funny to me, but the TV watching was not as present as before. But what if exactly these episodes were the ones that didn't feature it? To see if there is anything to it, I checked all the available seasons for me, meaning seasons 1 to 35. I was keeping a list and along the way noticed several issues with the show coming up. From what I've counted, these are the results. Yellow marks the amount of time TV has been actively watched in the show. Blue tells us about the times people were watching TV. but we didn't see what they were watching. Orange is all the times an episode starts right out of the gate with television. Beginning the episode with the program the characters watched is more of a thing in Golden Age Simpsons. As you can see, the relevance and use of TV watching corresponds with the Golden Age. Not exclusively, cause season 14 goes comparably high up, but nothing reaches the highs where the show really got its groove. Season 4 having the highest amount of TV watching and season 20 sitting at the lowest. In season 20 a lot more focus has been given into the new forms of media consumption, while TV had to stay in the background. Krusty has been consistently watched throughout the Golden Era with a solitude peak in season 21. This doesn't mean Krusty was absent for certain seasons, just his show hasn't been watched by any characters. It happened to be more often the case the kids would rather be sitting live in the audience than observing Krusty's show from home. Krusty was Bart's hero, and despite not acknowledging all the good deeds Bart did for him, Bart still held on to him. But this works better if there is the distance of experiencing Krusty on TV, than sitting in the crowd and witnessing so many times how miserable he is. Did Itchy and Scratchy fare better? Well, they occasionally get an appearance to parody something recent at the time, but often are limited to once a season later on, comparing to one episode in season 2 where the duo had a whopping 8 appearances alone. The significance stagnated exactly after season 8. News with Kent Brockman or any other of his programs on Channel 6 have had more relevance after the Golden Age, and though it declined in numbers, Kent Brockman still has a role in the show as Krusty does, but the same thing goes with him. His news reports aren't meant to be watched by the family or other characters, but just for us, to feed us some exposition. The catchy Eyes on Springfield doesn't exist anymore. As you can see, from seasons 1 to 8, what many would consider the Golden Age of Simpsons, a lot of screen time was dedicated to watching TV. TV helped to introduce plot points, or whole episodes revolved around TV watching. It's quintessential for the family to watch TV. Remember in their Shining spoof, Homer went crazy because there was no TV and beer. Yes, it's a Halloween episode, but it wouldn't work so well if it wouldn't fit the characters. Season 8 is already guilty for having Homer more and more in front of the lens. The problem is, the writers of later seasons took the wrong lessons and tripled down on that. The times the Simpsons themselves were the subject on TV felt special, because it was used carefully, but now it is a general state. After Golden Age it became ridiculous how many members of the Simpsons family appeared on TV or had entire shows dedicated to them, even side characters. The Bullies are on TV with their own show and have William H. Macy as a guest. Why? Though it's public access TV, how the hell can they get a celebrity? Homer is so much on the news, he has his own theme song.
Go, Homer, go!
Never know what he's gonna do.
Compare this to Homer's commercial for Mr. Blow. All he could afford was a time slot at 3:17 AM. It was a special instance. What marks the end of the Golden Age? Didn't happen from one season to another. Season 9 and 10 still had good episodes, but several issues gained a lot more traction, which doesn't mean questionable writing decisions weren't occasionally already in season 7 or 8, but they were more easily dismissed and not manifesting as problems at the time. Opinions differ on this subject, but I think it was the slow transition of the fact The Simpsons became too self-aware for their own good. The Simpsons took inspiration from different pre-existing sitcoms, but the show itself became a cultural phenomenon, dominating the 90s throughout. They paved the way for shows like South Park, Family Guy and more, but then something happened. No longer were the inspirations old sitcoms but the show itself and the competition spawning out of it. Like James Bond taking inspiration from Jason Bourne, referencing itself and its rivals becoming a
copy of a copy of a copy.
Again, reflecting the real world. They were celebrities in real life, so it made sense for them to appear on TV more, as the show referenced TV culture and nothing felt to them bigger than themselves. And Ouroboros, eating itself instead of creating, becoming so preoccupied to reference the glory days instead of focusing on creating new ones. And also, too much pointing the finger at what they are is nice every once and then, if it's not too clumsily handled, hence why moments like these feel cringy instead of clever as before.
Boring, seen it, lived it.
This breaks immersion, and yes, there was one to begin with. I can't get invested when the show is too aware of itself and throwing logic out the window. But it's animated, who searches for logic in The Simpsons, you might ask? Well, the show was at its best as an animated sitcom with real-life problems, utilizing the animated medium for sharply written satire. There is no need to directly speak to us, the viewer, like in episode Nedna. Oh my god, I hate this. At the end of the episode and season, they call to vote on their website if Ned and Edna should stay together or separate. This gained a lot of fuss at the time, but it feels so forced and dated, and I don't think this should belong into The Simpsons. Leaving the episode without a conclusion and asking how this storyline should continue comes off as a desperate gimmick. Meta humor felt like an added spice, not the main dish. The rise of self-awareness and meta-humor in The Simpsons has been a double-edged sword. While self-referential jokes and meta-commentary were always part of the show's DNA, their increased frequency, prominence, and first of all bluntness in later seasons also contributes to apathy in watching it. And this bluntness also happened to the references of other shows or movies within the show. Golden Age Simpsons were not targeting recent releases to seemingly keep their finger on the pulse of time, even going back decades to look for inspiration, unlike nowadays where it comes off as mandatory to attract a younger generation. The Simpsons' approach at parody or referencing movies was really sublime in the Golden Age. It happened to be more like a tribute to cinema's memorable outings, played out in the world of The Simpsons with their own spin on it. If you didn't know the reference, you still were able to enjoy the scene, but if you got that reference, you were in for a treat. Besides the mature themes, this also brought a smile to an older audience alike. And even when you're younger and not so familiar with Hitchcock, it's still funny, even if you didn't know the origin. In modern Simpsons, on the other hand, it doesn't feel as cleverly incorporated. For example, to make damn sure you understood their Breaking Bad reference, they show you Walton and Jesse watching the segment about their show. There seems to be no trust in us, the viewer, being able to catch it by ourselves. While we're on it, modern Simpsons more and more use real-life footage of movies instead of animating their version like they used to do. This comes off as lazy to me, seeing the school watching Dr. Dolittle, or Homer and Lisa watching Green Mile. If this feels off and you think I put the footage there, you're right. In reality, they watched To Kill a Mockingbird. Great, isn't it? It breaks the immersion once again, and what's the opposite of world building? World demolishing? Let's run with that. Demolishes the world even more and would again be more likely expected from Family Guy than The Simpsons. I can't fathom why they would incorporate real-life footage into later seasons, but this seems to be just another point of the visual style of the show changing, like the jump from 4:3 ratio to HD. This marks another key point in the show. The shift in aspect ratio from 4:3 to HD was a necessary visual change. Although it had to be, the improved resolution and vibrant colors are less visually appealing, comparably looking ugly even if it is technically better. However, without Rather and hand-drawn cell animation, the show lost not only part of its charm, but the transition to digital animation also brought changes to the color palette and lighting. I prefer the old style of light from the TV. It feels warmer than its digital counterpart. Let's compare how the show uses lighting from a sunset. On the left it feels more vibrant and lived in, and on the other side it looks so sterile and disconnected. Same with the night scenes. The 4:3 aspect ratio may seem dated to a lot of people, but it had advantages. The blocking and camera work were more cinematic and thought out. The animators and directors created each frame with careful attention to spacing, sight gags, and focus. On a side note, their use of music also had more dramatic effect. I always have to laugh whenever we hear Milhouse and Bart's fight music. But back to the visuals. When did the change to HD resolution happen? Season 20, Episode 9 features the old familiar intro for the very last time. The subsequent episode, Season 20, Episode 10, introduced a new opening and HD resolution. In the intro they have a new flat-screen TV, but in the same episode it is clear that they didn't update it yet. Clearly they wanted to save it to be the plot for an episode, right? Throughout the season the old TV is still around, even with the dissonance in the opening. The Simpsons underwent several identity changes, or better, crises. Aspect ratio and resolution aside, the family gained several technical updates to resemble the real world, and trying to grasp the societal shifts coming with them. This is also the reason why the timeline has been adjusted several times and why Homer and Marge are now millennials. It's fascinating, over the course of over 30 years you can see how and when the Simpsons desperately tried to reflect contemporary times, in fear they would seem out of touch otherwise. The rise of smartphones, social media and streaming platforms has been woven into the show's narratives. Characters frequently use devices like smartphones and engage with apps, memes, and trends that are ubiquitous in modern life. For some reason, it doesn't feel as natural as South Park tackling recent trends and events. Their attempts can feel forced or out of touch, as if the show is trying too hard to be hip, rather than providing a meaningful critique.
I kissed a girl and I liked it.
Which begs the question, who is the target audience anymore? Older fans often feel it's no longer their show. A younger audience may perceive it as outdated compared to edgier or more serialized competitors. Instead of having a clear specific target audience, The Simpsons now functions more as a cultural artifact, something people watch because of its undeniable history. This may be why people tune in, because of what the show represents. A cornerstone of television history that continues to evolve, even if its golden years are long behind. I think there was an opportunity to avoid these issues. They should have aged up the characters. After all, there seems to be a continuity. It's painful to watch Homer and Marge's high school years and falling in love with each other being retconned every now and then, only to adjust the timeline to the current real-life one. I mean, what's the point? If they would age the characters instead bit by bit, there would have been more potential in storytelling. And instead of these more frequent future-centric episodes where the writers like to play with adult versions of the kids, they could have done this organically and leave out the sci-fi aspects. This way, the show could have preserved the status of a sitcom. Instead of the constant status quo fixation, they've become another animated comedy show, like their successors and imitators. This is why it rubs me the wrong way seeing Bart and Lisa having no idea what VHS tapes are. Homer suggests the Simpsons watch his recorded VHS tapes, but the kids don't recognize the technology. They are completely oblivious, which makes only sense because they were moving their birth date around. But it hurts to watch as they originated from the 90s, for God's sake. The Simpsons possess now so much modern technology without explanation that one can only scratch their heads if we should really believe this is the same family that had to drive far, far away to get a new discount TV. Now Bart has a gaming chair and VR glasses, and Lisa has an Apple computer just to be contemporary. In their early years, the series has made sure we understand how purchases like these hurt the family's budget. That's one point that made them relatable. They would have to address how the family is able to afford all these things, but no, they rather keep it silent. There are no financial troubles anymore. In the third episode of the show, Homer loses his job, can't provide for his family, gets depressed, and contemplates suicide. This was played with gravitas, not for laughs. Yes, it's known as a comedy show, but The Simpsons also had well-written drama within it. Homer Simpson is just an ordinary blue-collar slob.
Now, I'm just an ordinary blue-collar slob, but I know what I likes on TV.
This happened to be true, but is no longer the case. With all the luxuries they have nowadays and many jobs or careers Homer tried, they shouldn't have leaned so much into the crazy antics and several careers Homer is seemingly achieving without breaking a sweat. Once it was refreshing to see him as an astronaut, but it becomes tedious if this is the shtick they are going for. Not only him, but the other family members also. Homer is just the most prominent out of the family with this issue. One time he became a boxer. It was a fresh idea at the time, but aren't you excited to see Homer as a curling player, or a crossing guard, or an ice cream man? As the show progressed, the characters became more reckless, crude, showing no signs of remorse, particularly Homer, hence jerk as Homer came to be. In season 27, episode 18, Homer tells Bart he is glad there is only one of him. If there would be another kid in the family like him, Homer would go and hang himself from a highway overpass. What the This has to be one of the worst things to say to a child. Could you imagine Homer in the golden era saying something like that to Bart? It doesn't seem right to me. It is not suiting the characters at all. Something crude the writers didn't give a second thought about. Jokes are not written for the characters. Instead they seem more like tweets.
I'll die as I lived, failing and sweaty.
Who talks like that? The writers think about something they deem funny but don't stop to reminisce how the characters have been written. Only what superficial meta-purpose they fulfill nowadays. Does it make sense if the character says this or that? The characters are not thought of as persons anymore, but hollow caricatures to spout something funny. This also extends to physical comedy. In season 21, episode 11, Homer tosses Bart around like a sack of potatoes.
Hold up. Wait a minute. Something ain't right.
Not because it is child endangerment, but it feels so cartoony and random to desperately get a chuckle out of the audience. The gag definitely ain't worth it, as it really ruins the immersion. I have to ask myself again if this is The Simpsons or Family Guy. It comes off as throwing a lot out there hoping something will stick. Even side characters are handled more tasteless. Reverend Lovejoy and Mrs. Lovejoy are having a gothic necrophilia kink.
Jesus Christ.
There's no purpose in that, except shock value. The plots are sometimes out of this world too, like The Simpsons flying with an UFO to the home planet of the aliens Kang and Kodos. Oh god, this is no Halloween episode, this is canon. So, The Simpsons' relatability is dead. The maximum income allowing them to purchase everything they should have, traveling everywhere they could go and becoming stars in the show like in real life. Attending more red carpet events than Disney announcing another unnecessary live-action remake. More times being on TV than in front of it. But it's no big deal if they are more in front of the lens as long as the story and jokes work, right? Well, I prefer them sitting on the couch wondering what the almighty TV has in store for them because it worked so damn well in the past. Although since episode 10 of the 20th season the new opening features a new flat screen TV, it was in the next season episode 21 episode 3 where The Simpsons finally obtain a flat-screen TV. But unfortunately, it's no big deal. Never mentioned or explained how they got it. Are you serious? This just feels wrong. The very lost opportunity. It's essential to The Simpsons and frankly should have been a whole episode dedicated to how each family member reacts and deals with the new TV. This is the critical point where all hopes of old Simpsons are thrown out the window. They never will come back no matter what. The idea of the whole family being the living embodiment of the 90s with all the cultural aspects
Fairy dust. It doesn't exist.
to forget or consciously leave this trademark behind is another core element of the show heading to the trash bin. They missed a chance when it was timely to adapt and perhaps at a certain point in time it felt just like an obligation to let them have contemporary technology. Though Homer spent in season 17 several days at Lenny's place constantly watching TV on his new plasma TV, there are no other family members affected by this. The importance of TV for the family and show itself should not be underestimated. Like I said before, in Golden Age, several episodes revolved around TV, with the TV watching being the center of the plot, or seeing how the plot unravels for the characters. In Season 6, Episode 9, a lot of the plot and jokes play out through TV. It's the one where Homer gets accused of sexual harassment. And yes, Homer is the subject matter, but it was an uncommon situation for the whole family, so it was interesting to see how they dealt with it. They experienced new information the same way we did, through watching TV. Homer tries to defend himself, but media warps the truth because otherwise no one would tune in, so they milk every last drop of Homer's alleged crime until his innocence is proven with him being quietly justified, but already heading to the next sicko. A lot of characters have been introduced through their TV. One of the funniest was Troy McClure. You may remember him from such shows as America's Funniest Tornadoes, or I Can't Believe They Invented It, but the character retired with the 10th season because of Phil Hartman's tragic death. In Season 16, Episodes 11 and 12, they clearly wrote segments with his character in mind, but replaced him with Gary Busey and Robert Wagner. From Season 9 onwards became the change clearer, of random satirical TV gags to more random gags in general. Even endings of episodes don't conclude as before, but have random gags, without sincerity or a sense of closure. Like this bullshit ending. Lisa hopes civilization will still be there for many years, but a comet with zombies is approaching the Earth.
I can't keep watching this dreck.
TV set up jokes for the characters themselves, even when they were just sitting at home.
TV respects me. It laughs with me, not at me.
You stupid.
TV has always had a special place for the family. Now let's compare this with a scene from episode 19 of season 21. Because of a high electricity bill, which is nonsensical as the family has to have a fortune to live like they do, but I have to appreciate the effort of doing something relatable, Homer is unplugging all electric devices he can find, starting with the TV. That's not humor to me. If we would place this scenario into Golden Age Simpsons and they would have to reduce electricity, the TV would be the very last thing Homer would consider to unplug, next to the fridge because it keeps his beer cold. He would frantically turn off every device of the other family members and consider stumbling around in the dark, further risking his family to get mildly hurt in the process. Justifying his act as TV is the only light they need, metaphorically and literally. It would be offensive to TV if they wouldn't sustain it, considering how much it gave them through the years. That's the potential that lies within this setup, and I think it fits the theme of the show well. But another missed opportunity from either not caring or misunderstanding the key aspects. So in the end, I learned to stick to the Golden Age Simpsons like I used to. Whenever I'm going to rewatch these seasons and see Krusty, Kent Brockman, Itchy and Scratchy or Troy McClure being on TV, I know these are the good times when the Simpsons were at the peak, the figurehead of 90s television, the Simpsons family simply coming together, and I'm still feeling welcomed by them to watch. Thanks for watching.
What else is on?